Hello interwebs and welcome to my channel. So many of you may know that I am a huge fan of the Star Trek literary verse. So for today's video, I wanted to do a review of a Star Trek book that I recently read and absolutely loved, and that is Star Trek Deep Space Nine Enigma Tales by one Una MacCormack, who many of you may know also wrote the recent Star Trek Picard novel, The Last Best Hope, which I also reviewed on this channel, so go check that out if you're curious about my other thoughts on Una MacCormack's book. But I want to talk about this book in particular because I absolutely adored it. This book is about Garek mostly, and also Dr. Pulaski, who you may remember from season 2 of Star Trek The Next Generation. She was basically the Dr. McCoy equivalent that was kind of really offensive and racist towards Data, which kind of weirdly has come back around in Star Trek Bard with this sort of like attitude against the synth. So maybe Pulaski eventually got the last laugh there in the end. Anyways, this novel basically takes place on Cardassia several years after the end of Deep Space Nine and the rebuilding of Cardassia after the end of the Dominion War. And minor spoilers for some post-Deep Space Nine relaunch book stuff, because this book is the last in that sort of storyline before, Star Trek Picard came out and basically all canon has gotten reset a little bit, so it's unsure whether we'll get more stories in this continuity. So this is sort of the last one there. So it does kind of spoil all the other Deep Space Nine books that came before it, but I honestly think that's fine. I haven't read all of those books either, and I stepped into this book and understood it perfectly fine. Basically, where we're at right now is Dr. Bashir, after the events of a previous book, Star Trek Control, is currently in a coma, and he has been brought to Cardassia Prime, where Garek has been essentially elected leader of a rebuilt Cardassia. And basically, Garek writes letters to Bashir as sort of like a framing device between chapters of the novel about all the places he wished he could take Bashir and show him around Cardassia Prime. The reason being is that Cardassia has finally started to come out of its dark ages. It's no longer a place where you have to worry about getting a knife stabbed behind your back or the secret police or even the Dominion coming in. Cardassia is finally rebuilt into being a really open place of learning and trust and a thriving civilization. But it still has this long shadow cast on it by its history that a lot of people that are prominent in the government on Cardassia may have done some really terrible stuff during the Bajoran occupation and also during the Dominion War. So Garek is basically trying to push through a law that is going to hold some of these people accountable, including possibly himself. But at the same time, Dr. Pulaski is visiting to get an award for some medical thing or other that she was doing, and starts to get wrapped up in a strange spy tale going on Cardassia that Garek eventually becomes involved in. Pulaski gets kidnapped and eventually starts to distrust Garek and different elements of the Cardassian government and civilization, because there's a lot of prejudice by the Federation, somewhat rightfully so, against Cardassians, believing them to still be mistrustful and spies and doing all their weird spy game stuff. It's honestly a really great look within this book about prejudice and how can civilizations evolve and grow and learn to move past their darker natures and move past some of the preconceptions that people may have on them because of how they themselves acted in the past. Pulaski, while she is kind of a jerk in this novel, and she really deeply frustrates me both when she appears in the actual show The Next Generation and in this novel, but that's not to the detriment of the writing, it's to the detriment of the character, and I think Una MacCormack wrote Pulaski perfectly. I just get frustrated at Pulaski in all the right ways, I think. And does show that she does have some rightful prejudice against the Cardassians. And Garek kind of having to work as the leader of the society from two different angles. One, he kind of has to because he is the person who knows how to play that game. He kind of has to play it a little bit, but he hates doing it. He hates playing the spy because he wants to believe that Cardassia has finally grown better and finally changed, and is trying to show that Cardassians can be better. And I'm trying to not be specific about the plot because I think some of the intrigue in the plot is a lot of fun and super fascinating, kind of gets into the political stuff going on Cardassia, but it really just feeds into these themes of, can we become better? Can we move past the things that have haunted our past? And also, at what point are we allowed to move past the things of our past? I mean, Garek did some pretty horrible stuff, it's implied, in Deep Space Nine. And should he be allowed to be redeemed for it? Is he the right person to be leading Cardassia Prime at this moment when Cardassia has finally moved beyond into a brighter future? Is someone who is so burdened by his past and done some possibly very irredeemable things be allowed to be a leader of a redeemed Cardassia. It's a lot of very interesting thematic threads and ones that have no clear answer, and I think Una MacCormack does a great job sort of discussing them and, looking at them from all different facets and showing that, everyone kind of has to think about this and work through this. People who have prejudice, people within the society, and all those things. Another reason that I really, really love this book, and I kind of alluded to it earlier in this review, is that for once, finally, in this novel, Garek is actually portrayed as queer. Garek in Deep Space Nine was played by the actor who portrayed Garek, whose name I'm blanking on. I thought I had it at the top of my head, but for some reason I'm blanking on it. Don't kill me, YouTube comments. Andrew Robinson. That's his name. He played he played Garek as gay and having an attraction to Bashir. And that ultimately was something that the writers of the show, Ira Stephen Bear, in the recent Star Trek Deep Space Nine documentary, confirmed that they all knew that Garek was gay, but they were never really confident enough to portray him as such on the show. They thought that they wouldn't be able to do it, and so they never even asked the network to. Again, that's something that Ira Stephen Bear, the showrunner of Deep Space Nine himself, even said in the documentary, that they never even asked the studio if they could do it, which is ultimately disappointing. And kind of frustrating for me as a queer fan of Star Trek that we didn't get this really beautiful examination of this side of the character of Garek. And this book finally lets that shine through. Like I said, he writes letters to Bashir throughout the entire book as sort of like framing devices, showing us like how Garek views Cardassian now and how it's changed. But you can also see this really flowery, beautiful love that he has for Bashir. It's very tender and very loving in all of those letters. And also, it's shown in this book that Garek has a male lover that works for him in the Cardassian government, that he does have someone that he trusts and loves, and who is also a Cardassian doctor. So he kind of has a thing for doctors, it's implied. And it's just really, I honestly really love that Una MacCormack just really beautifully portrays Garek's sexuality. It's not made a big deal of, it's not focused on in any specific way, but it's just allowed to just be there. And it's allowed to be just a beautiful part of Garek's complex character. And I am supremely, supremely grateful for Una MacCormack for doing that. And I think it's one of the most beautiful parts of the novel, actually, his letters to Bashir and his relationship with the other Cardassian doctor. So that's my review of Enigma Tales. I absolutely loved it. It's a great spy thriller. It's a great discussion of all the themes that Star Trek tries to discuss, of prejudice and trying to move past our darker natures. It's very Star Trek in that way, and also does things better than the Star Trek Deep Space Nine show did in many ways, like showing that Garek is actually queer. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on Enigma Tales. Let me know down in the comments below. Have you read the novel? Have I encouraged you to go get the novel? Do you like these reviews of Star Trek books? Let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear all of that. And if you want more reviews of Star Trek books, more reviews of Star Trek stuff, more discussions about Star Trek and other geek topics, give my channel a subscribe. That always helps me out. And if you want to help make these videos even better and help me one day maybe do this full time, which would be my dream, please consider giving to my Patreon page. But regardless of if you subscribe or give to my Patreon, I'm just really, really glad that you stopped by, and I hope that you, as always, live long and prosper. And special thanks to my commander level and above Patreons: Eli Berg-Moss, Stefan Schuthart, Boyd and Marybeth Earl, Michael McGee, Lal Lindley, Wellington Marcus, Inar Sigurdsson, Marika Kwiechin, Munir Amlani, Mari Nekar, and Polly Mina.